having you introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself, Victor, a little bit about your background and, what brought you to nursing school in Canada.
Okay, yeah, my name is Victor AJK, and I'm in first year of nursing. I'm in the Saskatchewan Collaborative Program, and prior to joining nursing, I completed a bachelor's degree in industrial microbiology back in Nigeria, and I also completed a master's in business in Nigeria as well. I worked in pharmaceutical sales for Philips Pharmaceuticals for 7 years. I left the job as a regional sales manager and joined a telecommunications company, Globacom. And I also sold, telecommunications to healthcare industry, the healthcare sector. On migrating to Canada, I migrated here in 2016. My wife actually came here to study for a master's degree in computer science. Yes, she secured funding, scholarships, and then decided to come. And initially, the plan was for her to come study, and I'll visit from time to time. But because we had a son and it was quite difficult, we didn't put into consideration the study formats could be different. So it was a challenge, and I had to quit my job to come support her. Yeah, so when I got here, I first got into banking. I was in banking for the 5 years I've been in Canada. I was in banking, and then I decided to do something that's more in tune with, and that's how I got into nursing.
That, I think, is a very interesting life journey. It sounds like you've seen and done a lot before coming to this place of being a first year nursing student.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me, what is unique about being a Nigerian and a nursing student in Canada? What's unique about that experience?
The unique thing about being a Nigerian in a Canadian nursing school would be bringing in my unique uniqueness as an individual, bringing in those stories, the experiences from my life journeys, from my prior academic experiences into the program. I mean, being Nigerian also means bringing my cultural perspective to care. We have a different perspective to care. Nigerians are very caring, very friendly. Bringing that perspective into the study of nursing, the practice of nursing, which, when I complete the program, I'll be going into. And also adding to that diversity. Diversity is great for academics. For academia, diversity is great. So being a Nigerian, bringing my prior academic experience, both from my bachelor's degree in industrial microbiology, which is also related to nursing, bringing my experience, from a master's degree in business, all that adds the flavor, which I believe my teachers and my classmates would benefit with from my participation in class.
You spoke a little bit just in that statement about cultural influences in caring, or cultural influences to your way of being. Tell me, could you give me an example of how that's influenced your path in nursing, or what is unique about that specific part of you, and how might it influence your learning or your ability to be a nurse in Canada?
Yes, Nigerians are very friendly. In Nigeria, we are very friendly people. We are extroverts. We are very warm. And one of the surprising things I discovered here, that people are not warm. When you get to know them, they open up to you. But ideally, like when we moved there, we lived in apartment buildings. So people really say hi or acknowledge greetings like good morning, So from that perspective, going into a place of care, it's also a part of reaching out to people. Social impact is one of my values that I hold core to my being. And there's a lot of talk about racism, diversity, and all that. So going into nursing is also for me a part of meeting or living my values, which is social impact, reaching out to people. I mean, we are all human beings. So if someone during their or in their life they see someone who looks different from them as different, now when they are vulnerable and they have such a person to depend on, what would they think? So I mean, not to sound preachy, but it's also a part of social impact to say, hey, we are all the same. When you're vulnerable, the person helping you, person who could be helping your life, helping you get healthier, could be someone you never expected you could get help from. So that's part of why I didn't have difficulty in going into that field. When I thought of it and I said, yeah, this is something I could do. I mean, there is something interesting that happened during my medical sales rep days. I was promoting respiratory products, salbutamol inhalers, salmeterol for asthmatic patients. And usually my primary target was the teaching hospital, the University College Hospital in Ibadan, Nigeria. And usually you book appointments to see the professors or the senior doctors. And one day I was with one of the doctors, and his friend, one known professor, had an asthmatic attack. And this was someone that he doesn't take kindly to, the medical, he's a senior doctor and he was revered, right? So even being in that office was like, how did you get access or money to get access to this place? And there he had his asthma attack. There was no inhaler to help him. And in my sample bag, I just brought out one of the inhalers and said, hey, see if this could help. And that helped him, and everybody was relieved, that, I could save his life in such a place where was reserved for only senior professors and doctors. So again, it comes to, care cuts across race line, it cuts across stratas in life or social classes. Anyone could save your life. Anyone could be the one providing care to you, irrespective of race, color, or creed.
Well, I just want to follow up on that. I think it's an interesting thought and quite right that, care does cut across all these boundaries. But I suspect that you've probably also had some challenges related to your differences. Tell me a little bit about that, how that has, what that looks like in your life and what your greatest challenge is.
Well, in terms of before I moved to Canada, I never saw myself as less of a person or a person from another ethnic group or an ethnic minority. Nigeria is multi-ethnic place, but I never thought of it in that way. When I moved to Canada, I mean, when you're filling forms, you are asked to select if you're an ethnic minority, if you identify as Black. Initially, I had issues with that. I mean, I'm not Black. When I look at my son is 6 years old, he tells me, oh, he's brown, he's not Black. Because he's not dark skinned, and I'm not even dark skinned, but those are some of the challenges I had. And when I started working, I could also see some challenges, not in having opportunities, but it could be in conflict management, conflict resolution. If I have an issue and I discuss it with a superior, would they handle that issue as they would handle someone from another racial background? Would it be as important to them that, oh, I'm bringing this issue up? If I have a challenge, will it be acknowledged as another person from another racial background? in
So what's the answer
the
to that question? Would it
what
be?
did he say?
What's the answer to that question? You're asking, would it be followed up the same way? What was your experience there? What did
Well, in my own experience, what I've learned is it's not usually the same. It's not usually, you don't get the same response. And thankfully, when I had some of those challenges or experiences, you know, um, this was before George Floyd. George Floyd opened the eyes of many to and opened secrets. Not in the sense because before George Floyd happened, a lot of Black people in the US have been killed extrajudicially. But the problem is now when that happens, are the authorities swift to take action compared to say, oh, there is a news that a white person got shot or got killed? Is it the same reaction? So those are some of the nuances, nuances I see of I've experienced, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how you've created a relationship between George Floyd in the States and your own walking through life here in Regina, Saskatchewan. I appreciate that connection. Yeah, very interesting. I'm interested to know what advice you would give to your teachers. What advice would you give to your teachers? What would you want them to know about you, about teaching people who are, socially constructed as an ethnic minority? What do teachers need to know?
Um, well, first and foremost, I believe in the golden rule of doing unto others what you want others to do unto you. I have this belief that human beings are not as selfless as we publicly claim to be. Because from my life experiences, people might profess to, oh, given this situation, this is how I would react. But when it comes home, they usually don't react that way. So if you are faced with someone who is from an ethnic minority and they bring a challenge to you or they are facing a challenge, you know, think of it first of how would I handle this if it were my own son, if it were someone from my own background? Because again, going back to George Floyd, that's what this whole thing is about. Black Lives Matter, that's what it's all been about. It's not about, it's about treating everyone fairly and equally. That's one. Then two, uh, sometimes there is an assumption that, okay, maybe because people tend to speak differently, probably they might not be academically upright or sound. Yeah, and my response to that is English is just a language. It's not a test of knowledge. Many of my classmates from Nigeria have first degrees, have had many life experiences. But even though English is our first language, we probably have a different way of communicating in English language, which might be strange or sometimes funny or sometimes lost in translation when someone from a minority is communicating in English language. So one is having that patience to understand, okay, what exactly is it saying? And another thing would be to make the classroom a safe place. Whenever I get into a class and I make the point, when we are discussing, I said this class should be a safe place. There is a reason for that because there's a power imbalance between the teacher and the students. That power imbalance is doubled for someone from a minority background. One, they have the fear of, okay, this is my teacher. It might not be a fear, but it's also a concern. This is my teacher. How do I perform in this class? How do I, then there is also that challenge of I'm from an ethnic minority or from a racial minority, what do I do to make sure, I also meet up to the standards of this teacher based on the challenges I might have, which could be, writing properly, communicating properly. So like I said, the disadvantage is double, the concerns are doubled.
I think those are excellent tips. I think that's excellent feedback for teachers across the country. I think we need to hear this. We don't hear these perspectives from our students often enough. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That same question facing a student coming behind you. So what advice would you give to a student who right now is thinking, I want to start nursing next fall? And maybe they're, again, from a socially constructed ethnic minority. What would you tell that person? What should they watch out for?
Well, I'll tell them to be confident, do your best as a student, fulfill your own part of the contract as a student. Be open to feedback. Feedback is very important, both positive and negative feedback. It's important. Now, if you get feedback that you think is not fair, be open to discuss it with the professor or whoever is providing that feedback. Because another thing I've also come to learn from my journeys in life is attitude matters and perception is different. Sometimes you give a feedback with a good intention, which could be lost in communication or translation, not because it's your fault, again, because of the concerns coming from the other party. So again, this brings us back to making the classroom a safe space for open communication, open feedback. Now, if you believe the feedback is not fair, is not balanced, now you should be able to go back to say, excuse me, yeah, I received this feedback. Thank you for the feedback. However, this is what I think. So that way you shift it from being a negative feedback to a constructive feedback. Another advice from what I've heard within the community, before I got into nursing, I had a lot of friends who were in nursing, who also went through the program. Now, most of the challenges they've come to have been with clinicals, the huskies, the clinical setting. And all we've talked about also, when you study communication dynamics, the power imbalance. I mean, if it were a class process, students placed on equal footing, anyone who studies could study the materials, complete the exams, and pass. But when it comes to the clinicals, the practical setting, now it's a one-on-one situation. And these are places where those things will come into play. The power imbalance, if the student feels they are not safe, they might not be open to communicate. If the teacher feels, I don't get him, he doesn't get me, now there will be a challenge and the student might, I can't work with this person, and the student fails the class.
So I want to know, I think that we have this real fear in our society and for sure in nursing about using the word racism. How can a teacher ensure that if they have to give negative feedback or constructive feedback, that the student doesn't perceive that as racism? How can a teacher ensure that?
Okay, in nursing, I've heard a lot about cultural sensitivity, cultural safety, cultural humility. Now, if the nurse teacher is really in tune with these theories and are practicing them, The first thing when you start a class is to assure your students across board that this is a safe class, this is a safe environment. Acknowledging that there might be challenges, but I'm willing to work with you. Directions could be misinterpreted. And again, the power imbalance, a student from a cultural, a minority culture, one, like I said, they have their concerns are doubled. Now, the fear of, am I doing the right thing? They're afraid, will the residents, the patients, will they be open to me providing them care? Because, I mean, we also acknowledge that, with talking about violence in healthcare, racism in healthcare. Now, the patient, the student is working with, are they open to me? Are they comfortable with me providing them care? Because this could also influence how the student performs. So in providing feedback, once at the beginning of the class, you make your class a safe environment, acknowledging, it could be a one-on-one with this will say, hey, maybe acknowledging that I know there might be challenges along the way, but I'm willing to work with you. So that the practicum or the practicum on clinical is not seen like it's a process to eliminate people out of the program, but indeed to teach them and help them attain the safe competencies required to practice.
Victor,
So it could be a one-on-one, feedback to say, hey, this is what I noticed. Could you do it this way next time? Or what fears do you have? What concerns do you have? I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to work with you, to get this moving along.
So you think if the teacher were to do that, set up their classroom that way, that should negative or constructive feedback have to be given by the teacher, that the student would be more receptive and interested in improvement? Do you feel that that would be the outcome?
I believe that, because in whenever there is a power imbalance, the person at the lower rung, is always sensitive, because they believe that, oh, no matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough. But once they are assured, of their safety, once they are assured this is a safe, when they have confidence in the process, in the teacher, even when you provide a negative feedback, they will take it as, this is for my own good, meant for improvement, and not just meant to criticize. I mean, people are different. I've worked with different managers, different bosses, throughout my almost 15 years working career. Individuals will always be individuals, but also learning how to manage the manager, the person with the powers, is also important. But in all this, I've seen people, it all depends on how you do it. I've worked with terrible bosses who you could also walk through the fire for, because of what they represent, not the fear, but they have your back. They could drive you and drive, but if you know they have your back, whatever they are doing is for your own good. And I'm talking about instances where, you have like sales targets, and the manager needs you to meet his targets. So even though they are driving you and driving you, but because you also know that whatever they are doing, you benefit from it. Somehow, you learn to work with them to also achieve your own goals, not just the manager's goals. So it all depends on presentation. How do you present? How do you make people work for you and work with you?
I think you've offered teachers and nursing education more broadly a lot to think about today. And I just really want to thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts and opinions. It's, this is very important information that behooves all of us to come to terms with and to maybe learn to do things differently, right? As teachers and as diversity increases in our classroom. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thank you.